The scent of sandalwood and ceremonial herbs hung heavy in the air, mingling with the barely concealed tension of 200 werewolves packed into the ancient stone hall. I tucked myself further into the shadowed corner, grateful for the high-backed wooden bench that partially concealed me from curious eyes. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows across intricately carved walls, depicting the ancient legends of our kind. Tales of strength, of conquest, and of fated pairs bound for eternity. I hadn't wanted to come to the mating ceremony. No one expected me to find a match anyway. Not me, Eleanor Winters, the half-human anomaly with diluted blood and powers that manifested in unpredictable, often embarrassing ways. My fair hair, almost white in certain light, marked me as different among the predominantly dark-haired Lycans. But my alpha, James Carson, had insisted that all unmated pack members attend, regardless of status or bloodline. "It's important for pack unity," he'd said with that pitying smile that never quite reached his eyes. I knew the real reason: appearances. The Silver Moon Pack couldn't be seen excluding members, even ones they wished would simply fade away. Around my neck hung my mother's silver pendant, a small crescent moon cradling a single star. She'd pressed it into my palm before she died, whispering that it would lead me to where I belonged. When all seems lost, remember that even the smallest light can guide you home. I touched it now, drawing courage from the cool metal against my fingertips. The ceremony hadn't officially begun, but already the hall thrummed with anticipation. Eligible werewolves from 5 different packs had gathered, all hoping to find their fated mates, or at the very least, forge beneficial alliances through chosen pairings. I watched as they moved through the space, confidence in every step, power radiating from their perfectly controlled wolves. My own wolf, the one I could barely communicate with, let alone control, stirred uneasily within me. "Remember your place," Lisa, another pack member, had hissed at me before disappearing into the crowd. "Don't embarrass us." Her words weren't necessary. I'd spent my entire life remembering my place, making myself small, trying to be invisible. A hush fell over the gathering as Elder Miriam stepped onto the central platform. Her silver hair was bound in elaborate braids, and her eyes, those knowing, ancient eyes, swept across the crowd. "Tonight," her voice resonated through the hall, "we honor the oldest of our traditions. The goddess Moon has guided our kind for generations, bringing together those whose souls are destined to intertwine." I shifted uncomfortably as the elder continued her speech about destiny and divine matches. My gaze drifted toward the ceremonial thrones positioned on the far side of the hall, 5 ornate chairs, one for each visiting alpha, with the largest and most elaborate reserved for the guest of honor. The whispers had been circulating for weeks. The Northern Shadow Pack's alpha, the legendary Lycan King, was attending this year's ceremony. Some said he was finally seeking a mate after decades of solitude. Others claimed he merely came to observe the political machinations of the Southern Packs. Either way, his presence had transformed the typically formal ceremony into something electric with possibility. "The joining ritual will begin shortly," Elder Miriam announced. "Until then, share stories, renew friendships, and perhaps," her lips curved into a knowing smile, "discover connections you never anticipated." The crowd dispersed, moving toward the long tables laden with food and drink. I remained in my corner, watching. That's what I'd always been good at: observing, analyzing, understanding dynamics that others missed because they were too busy participating. My half-human nature might have made me physically weaker, but it had sharpened my perception in ways pure Lycans rarely developed. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since morning. The anxiety of attending the ceremony had killed my appetite. But now, surrounded by the rich aromas of roasted meats and spiced wine, hunger reasserted itself. I hesitated, then decided to brave the refreshment tables while everyone was distracted with socializing. I made my way around the edge of the room, avoiding the center where most of the attendees had clustered. The music had started, low, rhythmic drums accompanied by haunting flutes, an ancient melody meant to stir the wolves within us. Mine responded with unusual clarity, sending a shiver down my spine. "Something's different tonight," she whispered in my mind, the clearest communication we'd shared in months. "Just nerves," I muttered under my breath. reaching for a goblet of wine. "Talking to yourself, half-breed?" The mocking voice belonged to Tyler, one of the younger warriors from my pack who never missed an opportunity to remind me of my otherness. I didn't respond, keeping my eyes lowered as I filled my plate with small portions, enough to satisfy my hunger without requiring me to return to the table later. "You shouldn't even be here," he continued, moving closer. "This ceremony is for real wolves looking for mates. What could you possibly offer? You can barely shift without passing out." The truth in his words stung more than the malice behind them. My last attempted shift had indeed left me unconscious for nearly 2 days, but I forced myself to meet his gaze, refusing to show how deeply his words cut. "Alpha James required all unmated pack members to attend," I said quietly. "I'm following orders, same as you." He laughed, the sound drawing unwanted attention from nearby guests. "As if anyone would choose you. Even your own mother regretted..." "Enough." The single word, spoken without volume but with unmistakable authority, cut through Tyler's taunting. I turned to find Beth, our pack's beta female, standing behind me. Her expression remained neutral, but I caught the warning flash in her amber eyes as she looked at Tyler. "The ceremony is about respect," she reminded him. "Mind your manners, or explain yourself to James." Tyler's face flushed, but he nodded stiffly and retreated into the crowd. Beth turned her attention to me, her expression softening fractionally. "Are you all right?" she asked, surprising me. Beth had never been cruel, but she'd also never shown particular concern for my welfare. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. "Thank you for intervening." She studied me for a moment. "Find somewhere quiet to eat. The mingling will become more intense once the ceremonial wine is served." She hesitated, then added, "The northeast alcove should be empty. It's reserved for visiting dignitaries, but none have arrived yet." Before I could thank her again, she was gone, seamlessly rejoining the crowd. I stood motionless for a moment, my plate clutched in my hands, before turning toward the direction she'd indicated. The northeast alcove was partially secluded by heavy velvet curtains, offering a blessed reprieve from the increasingly loud celebration. Inside, several ornate chairs were arranged around a small table. I settled into one of them, sighing with relief at the momentary solitude, and began to eat. The food was exquisite, far better than the simple fare we typically enjoyed in our pack's communal hall. I savored each bite, allowing myself this small pleasure amidst an otherwise stressful evening. The chairs were surprisingly comfortable, especially the one I'd chosen, with its high back and cushioned armrests. I was halfway through my meal when the alcove curtains parted, and Elder Miriam entered. Her eyes widened when she saw me, an expression of horror crossing her face. "Child," she whispered urgently, "do you realize where you're sitting?" I looked down at the chair, noticing for the first time the intricate carvings along its arms. Wolves running beneath a full moon, their eyes inlaid with tiny amber stones that caught the light. A terrible realization began to dawn. "This is the Lycan King's ceremonial seat," she confirmed, her voice barely audible. "No one sits there without invitation. No one." Before I could move, a commotion erupted in the main hall. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of dozens of wolves dropping to their knees. A ripple of power, raw, ancient, overwhelming, washed through the room, so potent that even in our secluded alcove, I felt my breath catch. "He's here," Elder Miriam whispered, her face pale. "The Northern Shadow Alpha has arrived, and you're sitting in his sacred chair." I tried to stand, but my body seemed frozen, my muscles refusing to respond. The pendant at my throat had grown inexplicably warm, almost hot against my skin. The curtains to the alcove were thrown open, and there he stood, taller than any werewolf I'd ever seen, with shoulders that filled the entrance, and eyes like polished silver catching the torchlight. His dark hair was tied back from a face that seemed carved from stone, all sharp angles and unforgiving planes. Power rolled off him in waves, pressing against my skin like a physical touch. Those silver eyes locked with mine, widening almost imperceptibly. Behind him, I could see members of my pack watching in horror. Tyler's face a mask of vindictive anticipation. Even James looked alarmed. already calculating how to distance himself from whatever punishment was about to befall me. The Lycan King, Alexander Grey, Alpha of the Northern Shadows, the most powerful werewolf in the Western Territories, took a step toward me, then another. The silence in the hall was absolute. Hundreds of breath held in collective terror. I should have been terrified. I should have begged for mercy, or at least attempted to explain my mistake. Instead, something strange and unexpected happened. My wolf, usually so distant and quiet, surged forward in my consciousness with surprising strength. "Look at him," she commanded. "Really look." And I did. Beyond the intimidating exterior and crushing power, I saw something that stole what little breath I had left. Recognition. Not of his face or form, but something deeper, more primal. My pendant burned against my skin, and a strange certainty settled in my bones. His nostrils flared as he inhaled my scent, and something shifted in his expression. Shock, disbelief, and something that looked disturbingly like wonder. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant, sending shivers across my skin. I managed to shake my head, finding my voice at last. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "In the ancient tradition," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, his eyes never leaving mine. "When one claims the chair of an alpha during the mating ceremony, it is a declaration, a claim." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You have invoked one of our oldest customs, little wolf." Elder Miriam made a choked sound beside me. "My lord, she didn't know. She's only half Lycan, raised without proper education in our ways. Please forgive." He raised a hand, silencing her instantly. "What is your name?" he asked me. "Eleanor," I whispered. "Eleanor Winters." Something flashed in his eyes, recognition. "Impossible. Eleanor Winters," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. Then, to the shock of everyone present, including myself, he knelt before the chair, before me, and took my trembling hand in his. "I accept your claim," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent hall. "Before all gathered witnesses, I recognize you, Eleanor Winters, as my fated mate." A collective gasp echoed through the space. My mind went blank with shock. This couldn't be happening. The most powerful alpha in the territory couldn't possibly be claiming me. Half human, barely able to shift, the pack's embarrassment, as his destined partner. "This is a mistake," I managed to whisper, for his ears alone. Those silver eyes held mine, and for a fleeting moment, I glimpsed something vulnerable behind the power. "Is it?" he asked softly. "The moon goddess makes no mistakes, Eleanor, and neither do I." Before I could respond, he rose in one fluid motion and turned to address the stunned assembly. "The mating ceremony has blessed us early this year," he announced. "I have found my mate. Let the celebration begin." And just like that, with one catastrophic seating choice, my life as I knew it ended, and something far more terrifying and wonderful began. The next hours passed in a blur of shocked faces and hushed whispers that fell silent whenever Alexander, the Lycan king who had somehow declared me his mate, turned his gaze in their direction. He kept me at his side, one large hand resting possessively at the small of my back, guiding me through the crowded hall as if I belonged there, as if I belonged with him. "They're staring," I whispered, fighting the urge to shrink into myself as we moved past a group of Northern Shadow Pack members. Their expressions ranged from barely concealed disbelief to open hostility. "Let them," Alexander replied, his voice a low rumble that I felt more than heard. "They will learn to accept you, or they will answer to me." The casual confidence with which he spoke of my acceptance made my stomach twist with anxiety. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Fated mates were rare enough among full-blooded Lycans. The idea that I, with my diluted bloodline and broken connection to my wolf, could be destined for the most powerful alpha in the territory was absurd. A mistake, or worse, some kind of cruel game. We reached a relatively quiet corner, and Alexander turned to face me, his massive frame effectively shielding me from prying eyes. Up close, I could see the flecks of darker gray in his silver irises, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, the single scar that cut through his right eyebrow. He was older than I'd initially thought, not in physical appearance, as werewolves age slowly, but in the weight of experience evident in his gaze. "You're afraid?" he stated, not a question but an observation. I swallowed hard. "I don't understand what's happening." His expression softened fractionally. "The chair you chose is part of an ancient tradition. Centuries ago, before diplomatic relations were established between packs, alphas would place their ceremonial seats in neutral territory as a declaration of peace. If a wolf from another pack approached and sat in that seat during a mating ceremony, it was interpreted as the ultimate offer, a genetic and political alliance." "But I didn't know," I protested. "I just wanted somewhere quiet to eat." A hint of amusement flickered across his face. "Fate often works through such unconventional means." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Though I find it curious that you, of all people, would randomly select my chair, especially given what your mother carried." My hand flew instinctively to the pendant at my throat. "My mother? You knew her?" Before he could answer, we were interrupted by the arrival of James Carson, my pack alpha, flanked by 2 of his senior warriors. His face was carefully arranged into a mask of diplomatic pleasantry, but I could smell his anxiety, a sharp, acrid scent that cut through his usual cedar and smoke. "Alpha Grey." James inclined his head respectfully. "What a unexpected turn of events." Alexander's hand remained steady on my back, but I felt a shift in his energy, something colder, more calculating. "Indeed. It seems your pack has been harboring a treasure without realizing its value." James's smile tightened. "Eleanor has always been a unique member of our community." His gaze flicked to me briefly. Had we known of her potential significance, we would have, of course, provided more appropriate training and opportunities. The hypocrisy in his words made my wolf stir angrily. After years of relegating me to the fringes of pack life, of allowing the whispers and occasional cruelty, he now spoke as if I'd been merely overlooked rather than deliberately marginalized. "Is that so?" Alexander's tone was deceptively light, but even I could sense the dangerous undercurrent. "Perhaps you can explain why the daughter of Vivian Winters, a woman known for her exceptional gifts, has been living in your territory without proper acknowledgement of her heritage." James paled visibly. "Vivian Winters? We had no idea of Eleanor's maternal lineage. She came to us as an orphaned child. Records were incomplete." The lie hung between them, obvious to anyone with heightened senses. I had arrived at the Silver Moon Pack at age 7, devastated by my mother's death but with clear documentation of my parentage. James had simply chosen to focus on my human father's bloodline, rather than my mother's mysterious past. "We will discuss this matter further," Alexander said dismissively. "For now, I wish to continue the celebration with my mate." The word sent another shock through my system. Mate. The most sacred bond in Lycan society, deeper than marriage, more binding than any political alliance. The idea that this powerful man, this legend among our kind, truly believed I was destined to be his other half was incomprehensible. James hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, then nodded stiffly and retreated. I watched him go, a lifetime of seeking his approval suddenly rendered meaningless by the events of a single evening. "He fears me," Alexander observed, watching James's departure, as he should. "Everyone fears you," I replied before I could stop myself. Alexander's attention returned to me, his expression unreadable. "Do you?" The honest answer was yes. He terrified me on multiple levels. But beneath that fear lay something else, something I couldn't quite define. My wolf, usually so weak and distant, remained unusually alert in his presence, pushing against my consciousness as if trying to reach him. "I fear what this means," I admitted finally. "What happens now? You can't truly intend to take me as your mate. I can barely shift. I have no political value, no special abilities. I'm half human. Your humanity is not the liability you've been led to believe," he said quietly. "And as for special abilities," his gaze dropped to my pendant. "You carry more power than you know, Eleanor Winters." Before I could question him further, Elder Miriam approached, her expression grave. "The joining ritual must proceed," she announced. "All 5 packs are assembled and waiting." Alexander nodded. "We will participate." "What?" I stared at him in alarm. "We can't." "Not the final bonding," he clarified, his lips twitching slightly at my panic. "Merely the initial recognition ceremony. The actual mating bond would require considerably more privacy." Heat flooded my cheeks at his implication. The joining ritual involved several stages, beginning with public acknowledgement and culminating in a private bonding that was both spiritual and intensely physical. The thought of such intimacy with this intimidating stranger made my heart race in a way that wasn't entirely due to fear. Elder Miriam led us to the center of the hall, where a circle had been formed by representatives from each pack. The 5 visiting alphas stood at cardinal points, with Alexander taking his position at the northern point. He drew me to stand beside him, his hand clasping mine firmly. "Tonight we witness an unexpected blessing," Elder Miriam began, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "The moon goddess has revealed a fated pair. Alexander Gray, Alpha of the Northern Shadows, Lycan King of the Western Territories, and Eleanor Winters of the Silver Moon Pack." A murmur rippled through the crowd, quickly silenced by Alexander's sharp glance. "As tradition demands, we ask, does any wolf present know of any reason why this pairing cannot be recognized?" My heart hammered in my chest. Surely someone would object. My inadequacy as a mate for someone of Alexander's standing was obvious to everyone present. A tense silence stretched for several seconds. Then Tyler, emboldened perhaps by alcohol, or simply by his perpetual disdain for me, stepped forward. "She's barely a wolf," he declared, pointing accusingly. "She can't maintain a shift, can't run with the pack, can barely access her enhanced senses. How can she be a proper mate to any alpha, let alone the Lycan King?" A collective intake of breath followed his outburst. Challenging an alpha's mate choice was dangerous. Challenging the Lycan King's choice was potentially suicidal. Alexander's hand tightened around mine, but his voice remained deadly calm. "Your name?" Tyler straightened, apparently committed to his course. "Tyler Reeves, warrior of the Silver Moon Pack." "Tyler Reeves," Alexander repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Your concern for my well-being is noted. However, your assessment of Eleanor's capabilities is both uninformed and irrelevant. The fated bond is determined by the moon goddess herself, not by the limited perceptions of those who have failed to recognize true power when it stands before them." He turned to face the assembly, his voice taking on the resonant quality of an alpha command, a tone that compelled obedience from all wolves present. "Eleanor Winters carries the blood of Vivian Winters, last descendant of the Lunar Seers. For those educated in our history, that lineage alone would command respect, but beyond her heritage, she stands here as my chosen mate. Anyone who questions her worthiness questions my judgment, and, by extension, challenges my position." The silence that followed was profound. Even Tyler had paled, belatedly realizing the implications of his actions. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process Alexander's words. Lunar Seers? My mother had never mentioned such a thing, though she had possessed an uncanny intuition that bordered on prescience. Elder Miriam cleared her throat, visibly shaken. "The challenge has been answered. Does any other wish to speak?" When no one moved, she continued with the ritual, guiding us through the formal acknowledgement. Alexander spoke the traditional words with confidence, while I stumbled through my responses, still reeling from the revelations about my mother's lineage. As the ceremony concluded, Alexander raised our joined hands. "Tonight begins a new chapter in the history of our kind," he announced. "The Northern Shadows and the lineage of the Lunar Seers unite once more. Let all present witness and remember." With those cryptic words, he led me from the circle, through the crowd that parted like water before him, and toward the great doors of the hall. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin, the moon hanging low and full in the sky. Several guards I hadn't noticed before fell into formation around us, maintaining a respectful distance. "Where are we going?" I asked, suddenly aware that we were leaving the safety of the ceremonial grounds. "My temporary residence," Alexander replied. "The traditional celebration will continue through the night, but we have matters to discuss that require privacy." A sleek black SUV waited at the end of the path. As we approached, one of the guards moved forward to open the door. Alexander gestured for me to enter first, then followed, his large frame making the spacious vehicle seem suddenly smaller. As we pulled away from the ceremonial hall, I stared out the window at the receding lights. Everything I'd known, my pack, my home, my understanding of myself, was falling away with each passing mile. "They won't accept this," I said quietly, watching the trees close in around us as we entered the forest road. "Your pack, I mean. They'll see it as a weakness, taking someone like me as a mate." Alexander studied me in the dim light of the car. "You've spent too long among wolves who lack vision," he said finally. "My pack follows my lead, and they understand power in all its forms. Some may question initially, yes, but they will learn." "And if I don't want this?" I dared to ask, turning to face him directly. "If I don't want to be mated to someone I've just met? No matter what ancient traditions or supposed fate dictates?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, quickly controlled. "Then we would have a problem," he admitted. "But I don't believe that's truly what you want, Eleanor." My wolf stirred again, pushing closer to the surface than she'd ever managed before. "Listen to him," she urged. "He knows us. You don't know what I want," I countered, ignoring my wolf's unusual advocacy. "You don't know me at all." Alexander's lips curved into that not-quite smile again. "I know you've spent your life feeling out of place. I know you touch that pendant when you're nervous or when you need strength. I know your wolf is stronger than you've been led to believe. She's simply waiting for you to trust her." The accuracy of his observations left me momentarily speechless. He leaned closer, his scent, pine and winter air and something wilder, enveloping me. "And I know," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "that when I'm near you, your pulse quickens, but not entirely from fear. You feel it too, Eleanor, the pull between us. It's been there since the moment our eyes met." I couldn't deny it. Beneath the fear and confusion lay an undeniable attraction, a recognition that defied logical explanation. But admitting that felt like surrendering to a fate I hadn't chosen and didn't fully understand. "Why me?" I asked instead. "Of all the wolves in all the packs, why would fate choose me for you?" Alexander sat back, his expression thoughtful, perhaps because you're exactly what I need. What my pack needs. Power comes in many forms, Eleanor. Not all strength roars. Sometimes, the most profound power whispers. The SUV turned onto a private drive, winding deeper into the forest. Ahead, lights glimmered through the trees, revealing glimpses of a large structure. "We're here," Alexander announced, as the vehicle slowed. "Welcome to Shadow's Edge, Eleanor, your new home." Shadow's Edge was not what I had expected. Rather than the fortress-like structure I had imagined would house the Northern Shadow Pack's Alpha, the building that emerged from the darkness was an elegant lodge constructed of massive timber and glass. Modern yet somehow timeless, it blended harmoniously with the surrounding forest, as if it had grown naturally from the earth rather than been built upon it. As we approached, I could see warm light spilling from numerous windows, casting golden rectangles onto the wraparound deck that embraced the structure. The scent of pine was stronger here, mingled with wood smoke and something else, something that felt strangely like home, though I'd never been here before. "This is your private residence?" I asked, as the SUV came to a stop at the base of wide stone steps. "One of several," Alexander replied. "This property has been in my family for generations. It's smaller than our main packlands further north, but more intimate, better suited for our current situation." Our current situation. Such a neutral phrase for the chaos he had unleashed by claiming me as his mate. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out, immediately aware of the watchful eyes of Alexander's security detail scanning the surrounding forest. Their vigilance reminded me of the position Alexander held, not just Alpha, but Lycan King, a target for those who might wish to challenge his authority or undermine his power. And now, I realized with a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the night air, I was potentially one of those targets as well. Alexander's hand settled at the small of my back again as he guided me up the steps. The massive wooden doors swung open before we reached them, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that assessed me with cool efficiency. "Margaret," Alexander greeted her. "This is Eleanor Winters. She will be staying with us indefinitely." The woman's eyebrows rose fractionally before her face smoothed into professional neutrality. "Of course, sir. We've prepared the East Suite as instructed." "Thank you. We'll take dinner in the study." "Have it brought up in an hour," Margaret nodded, stepping aside to allow us entry. As we moved past her into the soaring entryway, I caught her subtle inhale. She was scenting me, determining what I was. Her lips pressed together briefly, but she said nothing further. The interior of Shadow's Edge matched its external promise: warm woods, natural stone, and expansive windows that would undoubtedly showcase spectacular views during daylight hours. Tasteful art adorned the walls, much of it depicting forest scenes or abstract representations of wolves running beneath starlit skies. Nothing ostentatious, but every piece spoke of quality and careful selection. "This way," Alexander directed, leading me up a curved staircase to the second floor. We moved down a hallway lined with more artwork, passing several closed doors, before Alexander stopped at a set of double doors, made from richly stained cherry wood. He pushed them open and gestured for me to enter. The study beyond was everything the lair of a powerful alpha should be: commanding views through floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive desk positioned to survey the room, comfortable yet masculine furniture arranged around a stone fireplace where flames already danced. Books lined 2 walls, their leather spines hinting at both age and value. "Please, sit." Alexander indicated a pair of leather armchairs positioned near the fire. I chose one, perching on its edge rather than settling in, unable to relax despite the room's welcoming warmth. Alexander moved to a cabinet and withdrew 2 crystal tumblers and a decanter filled with amber liquid. "Whiskey?" he offered, pouring without waiting for my response. I accepted the glass but didn't drink, watching him over its rim as he took the opposite chair. For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Alexander seemed content to observe me, those silver eyes reflecting the firelight as he sipped his drink. "You said you knew my mother," I said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. He nodded slowly. "Not well, but yes. Vivian Winters was known among the higher echelons of our society. The gift of the lunar seers is rare and immensely valuable." "What exactly is a lunar seer?" I asked, finally taking a small sip of the whiskey. It burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from within. Alexander leaned forward, his expression intent. The lunar seers were an ancient bloodline, dating back to the first pack. While most werewolves draw power from the moon, the seers had a deeper connection. They could interpret its will, foresee paths and possibilities, sometimes even glimpse fragments of fate. My fingers found my pendant again, tracing its familiar shape. "My mother never told me any of this." "She was protecting you." Alexander's voice softened slightly. "The gift comes with danger. Throughout history, alphas have sought to control seers for their own advantage. Some were kept as glorified prisoners, forced to use their abilities to benefit their captors. Others were hunted down when their prophecies proved inconvenient." A chill ran through me despite the fire's warmth. "Is that what happened to my mother? Was she hunted?" Alexander's expression darkened. "What do you remember about her death?" The question prodded at old wounds, memories I'd tried for years to bury. "Not much," I said, my voice barely audible. "I was young. There was a fire in our cabin. I remember smoke, heat. Her pushing me out a window, telling me to run to the river and not look back. I swallowed hard. I obeyed. By the time help arrived, the cabin was gone. So was she. It wasn't an accident," Alexander said quietly. "Vivian had enemies, those who feared what she knew or what she might reveal. You think someone murdered my mother." The possibility had haunted the edges of my consciousness for years, but hearing it stated so plainly sent a wave of nausea through me. "I know they did." His certainty was chilling. "What I don't know is who." Vivian had been living quietly for years, hidden among humans after leaving her original pack. Something must have exposed her location. I set my glass down with shaking hands. Why are you telling me this now? Why claim me as your mate if you knew who I was? What danger might follow me? Alexander's expression hardened. Because you were never safe, Eleanor. The pendant you wear marks you as Vivian's daughter to anyone with the knowledge to recognize it. Sooner or later, someone would have realized what you are. The protection of the Silver Moon Pack was inadequate. And your protection is better? I challenged, anger flaring unexpectedly. You've painted a target on my back by claiming me publicly. I've placed you under the protection of the most powerful pack in the Western Territories, he countered. Anyone who wishes to harm you now must go through me and my entire pack first. So this was... what? Pity? Obligation to my mother's memory? Alexander's eyes flashed, a ring of gold briefly eclipsing the silver, his wolf responding to my accusation. Do not mistake my actions, Eleanor. While your heritage makes you valuable, my claim was genuine. You sat in my chair during a mating ceremony, accidental or not. Such coincidences are rare in our world. When our eyes met, I felt the connection, as did you. I wanted to deny it, but the whisper of recognition that had passed between us in that first moment couldn't be explained away. My wolf, usually so quiet, had nearly howled with joy at the sight of him. Why didn't my mother ever tell me? I asked instead, returning to safer ground, about the seers, about her abilities. Perhaps she hoped the gift would skip your generation, Alexander suggested. Or perhaps she planned to explain when you were older, but ran out of time. He studied me intently. Have you ever experienced anything unusual? Dreams that came true? Intuitions that proved correct? Unusual clarity during the full moon? I hesitated, then nodded slowly. Sometimes, I get feelings. Strong impressions about people or situations that usually turn out to be accurate. And dreams, yes, though I never connected them to anything real. I traced the rim of my glass thoughtfully. My wolf is strongest during the full moon, of course, but it's more than that. Sometimes I see patterns, connections between things that don't make logical sense but feel true. Alexander nodded as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. The gift manifests differently in each seer. It seems yours is subtler than some, but present nonetheless. Is that why I struggle to shift, because of my seer blood? Possibly, he acknowledged. The two aspects of your nature, wolf and seer, may be competing rather than working in harmony. With proper training, you might find balance. Training you conveniently provide, I observed dryly. His lips quirked. Among other things. He set his glass aside and leaned forward, his gaze intense. Eleanor, I understand your resistance. You've been thrown into a situation not of your choosing, with implications you're only beginning to grasp. But I need you to understand something fundamental. This connection between us is real. And it's rare. Fated mates are not simply a romantic notion. They're a biological and spiritual compatibility that transcends normal bonds. You can't possibly know that about me after a few hours, I protested. Can I? He rose suddenly, moving to stand before me. Before I could react, he reached down and took my hand, pulling me to my feet so that we stood face to face. Your scent calls to my wolf in ways I've never experienced. Your presence quiets something in me that has been restless for decades. And this... He raised his hand to my face, his fingers hovering just above my cheek without touching. Even without contact, I felt something leap between us. Energy, recognition, a current that made my skin tingle and my wolf surge forward eagerly. This is not ordinary attraction, he continued, his voice lower, rougher. This is recognition on the most primal level. Your wolf knows mine, Eleanor, even if you're fighting the knowledge. He was right, and that terrified me more than anything else that had happened this evening. My wolf, so long a distant, muted presence in my consciousness, was now fully awake and straining toward Alexander, with a longing that frightened me with its intensity. A knock at the door provided a welcome interruption. Alexander stepped back, allowing me to breathe again. Enter, he called, his eyes still on me. Margaret appeared, followed by two younger staff members carrying trays. They efficiently arranged a meal on a table near the window, roasted meat, vegetables, bread still steaming from the oven, and a bottle of wine. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Margaret asked when they had finished. "No, thank you. We're not to be disturbed unless it's an emergency." After they departed, Alexander gestured to the table. "You should eat. It's been a long evening." The reminder of food made me realize I was, in fact, starving. My abandoned plate at the ceremony felt like days ago rather than hours. I moved to the table and sat, watching as Alexander filled both our wine glasses. "What happens next?" I asked as he took his seat opposite me. "I can't just disappear from my pack without explanation." "James Carson has already been informed that you'll be coming with me," Alexander said, cutting into his meat with precise movements. "As your alpha, he had the authority to release you from pack obligations, which he did, quite eagerly, I might add." The casual revelation stung more than it should have. James had handed me over without hesitation, probably grateful to be rid of the pack's half-human oddity. "And my things? My apartment?" "Arrangements will be made to collect your belongings tomorrow. Is there anything of immediate importance you need?" I thought of my small apartment on the fringes of pack territory. There wasn't much there that couldn't be replaced. Clothes, a few books, some mementos from my mother. "No," I admitted. "Nothing urgent." Alexander nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then we have time to establish how we proceed." He took a sip of wine, his expression thoughtful. Traditionally, new mates would complete the bonding immediately, but I recognize the unusual nature of our situation. I'm prepared to allow you time to adjust before we finalize our bond. The implication made heat rush to my face again. The mating bond was completed through an intimate act, sealing the spiritual connection with a physical one. The thought of such intimacy with Alexander sent conflicting waves of fear and anticipation through me. "How generous of you," I muttered, stabbing a piece of vegetable with more force than necessary. Alexander's lips twitched. "I'm not known for my patience, Eleanor. Consider it a sign of my investment in our future harmony." I set down my fork, meeting his gaze directly. "And if I decide I don't want this future? If I choose to leave?" His expression hardened, the brief flash of humor vanishing. "That would be unwise. Not only because of what exists between us, but because you would lose my protection. The world is more dangerous for you than you realize, especially now that your identity has been publicly acknowledged. So I'm a prisoner. No." The word was sharp, definitive. "You are my mate, my equal. But you are also my responsibility, as I am yours. The choice to embrace that bond fully remains yours, but the reality of our connection and the dangers surrounding you cannot be wished away." I wanted to argue further, to assert my independence, but exhaustion suddenly washed over me. The emotional roller coaster of the evening, combined with the revelations about my mother and the relentless pressure of Alexander's presence, had drained me completely. Alexander seemed to sense my fatigue. "You need rest," he said, his tone softening. "We can continue this discussion tomorrow, when you've had time to process everything." I nodded, relieved at the temporary reprieve. "Where will I sleep?" "The East Suite has been prepared for you. It's private and comfortable." He paused, then added, "My quarters are in the West Wing, should you need anything during the night." The careful distance he was establishing, giving me space while remaining accessible, was unexpectedly considerate. I had expected demands, perhaps even force, not this measured approach. "Thank you," I said quietly, the words feeling insufficient for the tumult of emotions churning within me. Alexander rose and offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I placed mine in his, allowing him to help me to my feet. The contact sent another jolt through me, weaker than before but still disconcerting. He must have felt it too, for his fingers tightened briefly around mine before he released me. "Come," he said. "I'll show you to your rooms." As we left the study, I cast one last glance at the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. Like those flames, I stood at a crossroads between destruction and transformation, uncertain which path lay ahead. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, casting delicate patterns across a bed far more luxurious than my own. For a moment, disorientation gripped me. Where was I? Then the memories of the previous night crashed over me like a wave. The ceremony, the chair, Alexander's claim. I sat up, taking in the elegant east suite that had been my sanctuary for the night. The room was spacious, yet intimate, decorated in soothing blues and silvers. A sitting area with comfortable chairs faced glass doors leading to a private balcony. Through them, I could see forest stretching toward distant mountains, the landscape bathed in golden morning light. Sliding from beneath the silken sheets, I made my way to the balcony, needing fresh air to clear my head. Outside, the scent of pine and wildflowers filled my lungs. I closed my eyes, letting the rising sun warm my face as I tried to process the impossible turn my life had taken. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, turning back toward the room. A young woman entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Winters. I'm Chloe. Alpha Gray asked me to bring you breakfast and let you know that fresh clothes have been placed in the wardrobe." She set the tray on a small table near the balcony doors. "He requests your company in his study once you're ready." I nodded, somewhat relieved that Alexander hadn't come himself. "Thank you, Chloe." She hesitated, clearly curious about me but too well trained to ask questions. "Is there anything else you need?" "No. This is fine." I attempted a smile. "Actually, one thing. How large is this property?" "Shadow's Edge spans about 5,000 acres, mostly forest. The main house, where we are now, houses the Alpha, his immediate family and essential personnel. The Pack Village is about 2 miles north." She paused. "It's beautiful here. I think you'll like it once you settle in." The kindness in her voice was unexpected. I'd anticipated hostility from Alexander's pack members, not this gentle attempt at welcome. "Thank you," I said again, more sincerely this time. After Chloe left, I examined the clothes in the wardrobe. All new, all my size. I selected a simple outfit of jeans and a soft green sweater, then ate the breakfast she'd brought, fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee strong enough to brace me for whatever challenges this day would bring. When I could delay no longer, I made my way through the hallways, retracing last night's path to Alexander's study. The house felt different in daylight, warmer, less intimidating, though no less impressive. I passed a few staff members, all of whom nodded respectfully, but watched me with undisguised curiosity. At the study door, I paused, gathering my courage before knocking. "Enter," called that now familiar deep voice. Alexander stood by the windows, silhouetted against the morning light. He turned as I entered, and the impact of his presence in daylight was no less powerful than it had been in the ceremonial hall's shadows. He wore a simple black Henley that did nothing to disguise the powerful build beneath, and dark jeans that lent him a more approachable air than last night's formal attire. His dark hair was loose today, falling to his shoulders in a way that softened the hard angles of his face. "You slept well?" he asked, moving toward his desk. "Well enough, considering." He gestured to the chairs where we'd sat the previous evening. As I took my seat, I noticed papers spread across his desk, documents bearing official seals and signatures. "I've been in contact with your former Alpha," Alexander said, following my gaze. "The formal transfer of your pack affiliation is complete. Legally and within Lycan society, you are now under my protection and part of the Northern Shadow Pack." The finality of his words sent a wave of dizziness through me. "Just like that? Don't I have any say in this?" Alexander's expression remained impassive. "The decision was made the moment you sat in my chair, whether you understood the implications or not. I'm simply ensuring the proper protocols are followed, so I'm trapped." The words came out before I could stop them. "Is that truly how you feel?" He leaned forward, those silver eyes intent on mine. "Last night, you asked what would happen if you chose to leave. I answered honestly, it would be dangerous, but I never said I would force you to stay against your will. You just said the transfer is complete, that I'm part of your pack now. On paper, yes. In reality." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The mating bond between us remains incomplete. Without that final connection, you retain a certain autonomy. If you were determined to leave, I would not physically restrain you." Hope flared briefly, but his next words extinguished it. But I would track you, he continued, his tone matter-of-fact. I would find you and bring you back, not out of possessiveness, but because the dangers that threaten you would find you too. Likely before I could. What dangers? I demanded. You keep mentioning threats without specifics. Alexander was silent for a moment. The world of high-ranking alphas is more complex than you've been exposed to in your former pack. Alliances, power struggles, ancient grudges. These shape our politics. The lineage of lunar seers has been believed extinct for decades. Your emergence changes that balance. But I have no special abilities, I protested. Nothing useful anyway. Your potential matters more than your current capabilities, he countered. And beyond that, you're my mate. That alone makes you valuable to those who might wish to hurt me or gain leverage. The reality of my new position began to sink in. So, either way, I'm not free. None of us are truly free, Eleanor. We're all bound by circumstances, biology, fate. He stood, moving to a cabinet across the room. But within those boundaries, we can find meaning, purpose, even happiness. He withdrew a small wooden box and returned to stand before me. This belonged to your mother, he said, holding it out. It was recovered from her effects after her death and kept in our archives. I believe it's time it returned to you. I took the box with trembling hands. It was small, made of polished cherry wood, with a crescent moon inlaid in silver on its lid, similar to my pendant. Inside, nestled on faded blue velvet, lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Her grimoire, Alexander explained. Every seer keeps one, recording visions, interpretations, guidance passed through generations. I traced the cover reverently. How did you get this? Vivian entrusted it to my father before she went into hiding. She must have sensed danger approaching and wanted to ensure her knowledge wasn't lost. Why didn't she take it with her, or give it to me? Perhaps she feared it would draw attention to you, he suggested. Or perhaps she planned to retrieve it when you were older, ready to understand your heritage. I opened the journal carefully, finding pages filled with elegant handwriting, diagrams of moon phases, and passages in what appeared to be an ancient language. I can't read some of this. The oldest knowledge is recorded in the first tongue, the original language of werewolves. Few remain who can translate it fully. Alexander hesitated, then added, I know someone who can help with that, when you're ready. Closing the journal, I placed it back in its box. Thank you for this. It means everything. Something in Alexander's expression softened. You have more questions. Ask them. Why me? The words escaped before I could consider them. Not as a seer's daughter, but as me. Eleanor. The half-human who can barely shift. What possible value could I have to you as a mate? For the first time since I'd met him, Alexander seemed at a loss for words. He moved to the window, staring out at the forest beyond. I have led my pack for nearly a century, he said finally. In that time, I have faced challengers, wars, political upheavals. I have made difficult decisions, sacrifices for the greater good. I have been respected, feared, obeyed, but rarely understood. He turned back to me. When our eyes met last night, I saw something I had not expected to find in this lifetime. Recognition. Not of my power or position, but of me. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. You can't possibly know that about me, I whispered, can't I? He moved closer, his presence enveloping me like a physical force. Your wolf recognized mine instantly, Eleanor. That's not common, even among fated mates. And despite your fear, your distrust of this situation, you haven't once flinched from me, from what I am beneath the civilized exterior. He was right, I realized with a jolt. While Alexander's power and position terrified me, his wolf, the primal creature beneath the man, had never frightened me. If anything, it called to something deep within me, something that had been dormant until now. I need time, I said quietly, to understand all of this, to decide if I can be what you need me to be. Alexander nodded slowly. Time you shall have, but remember this, Eleanor, the choice before you isn't whether to accept your nature, but whether to embrace it fully. You are already what I need, The question is whether you will allow yourself to become who you truly are. A sharp knock interrupted us. Alexander's expression immediately shifted, the glimpse of vulnerability vanishing beneath his alpha mask. "Enter," he commanded. The door opened to reveal a tall man with auburn hair and watchful green eyes. "Sir, we've received reports of unusual activity at the southern border. Scouts have detected unfamiliar wolves moving in packs of 3. They're being careful to avoid our patrol routes." Alexander's posture tensed. "How many groups?" "At least 4 that we've confirmed. They're keeping their distance, but their pattern suggests reconnaissance rather than casual trespassing. Double the patrols," Alexander ordered. "Alert the warriors to remain on standby. And Nathan?" He glanced briefly in my direction. "Implement security protocol 3 for Shadow's Edge. No one enters or leaves without direct authorization." Nathan nodded, his gaze flickering curiously to me before he departed. "What's happening?" I asked as the door closed behind him. Alexander's expression was grim. "It seems our announcement at the mating ceremony has drawn attention sooner than anticipated. The question is whether they're merely curious, or something more sinister." The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo of watchful waiting. The security around Shadow's Edge tightened visibly. More guards patrolled the perimeter, visitors were thoroughly vetted, and I was never left completely alone. Alexander himself was frequently absent, managing whatever threat lurked at the borders. But he made time each evening to join me for dinner and share heavily edited updates on the situation. "They're testing our defenses," he explained on the 3rd night as we sat in his study, the remnants of our meal pushed aside. "Probing for weaknesses, gathering intelligence. Who are they?" I asked, frustrated by the vague information he'd been providing. Alexander swirled the wine in his glass, his expression pensive. "We've identified wolves from at least 3 different packs, all with historical grievances against either the Northern Shadows or the Lunar Seers." "How can anyone have grievances against the Seers? You said they've been thought extinct for decades." "Old grudges die hard in our world." He set his glass down, fixing those silver eyes on me. "During the Great Pack Wars, before the current territorial agreements were established, the Seers were powerful political figures. Their visions guided strategy, influenced alliances. Not all packs benefited from their counsel." I'd been reading my mother's journal over the past days, struggling to decipher what I could of its contents. Much remained mysterious, but I'd begun to understand the weight of the legacy I carried. "They want me dead," I stated flatly. "Or captured, because of what I might become." "Yes." Alexander didn't soften the truth, "but they'll have to go through me and my entire pack first." The protectiveness in his voice stirred something within me, something that had been growing steadily since our first meeting. Despite my initial resistance, I found myself drawn to Alexander in ways that transcended physical attraction or political necessity. When he was near, my wolf, no longer a distant presence but an increasingly vocal part of me, practically purred with contentment. "I want to help," I said suddenly. "I'm tired of being protected like some fragile object. If I truly carry the Seer bloodline, if I'm truly meant to be your mate, then I should be capable of more than hiding while others risk themselves." Alexander studied me thoughtfully. "What do you propose? Train me." I leaned forward, surprising myself with my own intensity. "Help me connect properly with my wolf. Teach me to shift without passing out. Show me how to access whatever abilities I might have inherited." A slow smile spread across his face. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him, transforming his stern features into something strikingly handsome. "I've been waiting for you to ask." Training began at dawn the following morning. Alexander led me to a clearing deep within the property, far from prying eyes but still within the secured perimeter. The rising sun cast long shadows through the trees as we faced each other in the dewy grass. "Your previous training was fundamentally flawed," he began, circling me slowly. "You were taught to view your wolf as something separate from yourself, an entity to be controlled or suppressed. This approach might work for full-blooded Lycans with dominant wolves, but for someone with your unique heritage, it's disastrous." "What should I be doing instead?" I asked, trying not to be distracted by his proximity. "Integration, not separation." He stopped directly before me. Your wolf is not your enemy or a separate being. She's the primal aspect of your soul, the embodiment of your deepest instincts and power. You need to embrace her completely. Merge with her rather than trying to control her. The concept was radical compared to everything I'd been taught in the Silver Moon Pack. There, shifting had been presented as a battle for dominance, the human mind maintaining control while the wolf's body took shape. Close your eyes, Alexander instructed. When I complied, I felt him move behind me, his hands coming to rest lightly on my shoulders. Feel your wolf. Don't call to her or command her. Simply acknowledge her presence within you. I focused inward, finding that familiar presence that had grown stronger since meeting Alexander. Instead of trying to draw her forward as I'd been taught, I simply observed her, noting how she responded to Alexander's proximity with pleasure. Now, his voice came low near my ear, imagine the boundaries between you beginning to dissolve. There is no Eleanor separate from her wolf. There is only one being with both human intelligence and lupine instinct. I tried to visualize what he described. Not a transformation, but an integration. A melding of two aspects of myself into a single, unified whole. To my surprise, my wolf responded eagerly, pressing toward my consciousness not with the usual struggle, but with something like relief. Yes, Alexander murmured, sensing the change. Now invite the shift, not as a change from human to wolf, but as an expression of your complete self. The transformation began almost immediately. But unlike every previous attempt, there was no pain, no sensation of fighting against myself. Instead, it felt like settling into my true form, natural and right. Bones shifted, muscles realigned, fur sprouted along my skin, all with a fluid grace I'd never experienced before. When it was complete, I stood on 4 paws, my senses sharper. The world around me transformed into a tapestry of scents and sounds that my human form could never perceive. I turned to look at Alexander, seeing him now through wolf eyes. Not just his physical form, but the aura of power that surrounded him, the bonds that connected him to his pack and territories, and the golden thread that stretched between us, pulsing with potential. He smiled, approval radiating from him. Beautiful, he said simply. His praise sent a wave of pleasure through me. My wolf's coat, I realized, was unusual. Not the common gray or brown of most werewolves, but a pale silver white that seemed to catch the morning light. I took an experimental step, then another, marveling at the strength and grace of this body that had always seemed so foreign before. Run with me, Alexander said, and before my eyes he shifted. His transformation so swift and seamless it appeared effortless. His wolf was magnificent, larger than any I'd seen, with a coat of midnight black that gleamed like polished onyx in the sunlight. Only his eyes remained the same, that distinctive silver that seemed to see through all pretense. He moved toward me, circling once before nudging my shoulder with his muzzle, an invitation. Then he was off, racing through the trees with powerful strides. After a moment's hesitation, I followed. Running as a wolf had always been beyond my capabilities before, my shifts too unstable, too painful to maintain long enough for more than a few stumbling steps. Now, I flew through the forest alongside Alexander, our paws barely touching the ground as we wove between trees and leaped fallen logs. Joy surged through me, pure, uncomplicated joy unlike anything I'd experienced before. We ran for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes, time losing meaning in the ecstasy of movement and freedom. Eventually, Alexander led me to a small stream where we paused to drink. As I lapped the cool water, I caught sight of my reflection, a white wolf with eyes the color of amber. Familiar yet strange. This is who you've always been, my wolf whispered. Except it wasn't a separate voice anymore. It was my own thought, my own realization. Alexander shifted back to human form beside me, seemingly unconcerned with his nakedness. After a moment's consideration, I did the same, discovering to my surprise that the transformation back was equally painless and natural. I struggled to find words adequate to describe the experience. That was you, Alexander finished smiling, the real you, without the limitations others placed upon you. We returned to the house to find Nathan waiting with news. The unknown wolves had withdrawn from our borders overnight, disappearing as mysteriously as they had appeared. They were testing us, Alexander concluded after hearing the full report, assessing our readiness, our response patterns. And, I asked, now included in these discussions as a matter of course, and they'll be back, he said grimly. This was merely the first move in a longer game. Over the following week, our training continued daily, each session built upon the last, strengthening my connection to my wolf and helping me discover abilities I'd never imagined possessing. I could now shift at will, maintaining my wolf form for hours without fatigue. My senses remained heightened even in human form, and I began to recognize the subtle energetic patterns Alexander had taught me to look for, the invisible connections that bound pack members together, the territorial markers that defined boundaries. Most surprisingly, aspects of my seer heritage began to manifest. The first time it happened, we were walking the northern perimeter together, when a vision suddenly overtook me, not of the future, but of the past. I saw figures moving through these same trees decades earlier, caught glimpses of battles long concluded, heard fragments of conversations long forgotten. The land remembers, Alexander explained when I described what I'd seen. And you can read its memories. That's a rare gift, even among seers. Our evenings fell into a pattern as well. Dinner in his study, discussing the day's progress and reviewing passages from my mother's journal. As the days passed, the distance between us gradually diminished. His touch, initially rare and cautious, became more frequent. A hand at my back, fingers brushing mine when passing a book. The press of his shoulder against mine as we bent over the journal's cryptic pages. Each contact sent that now familiar current through me, the bond between us strengthening even without the final mating ritual to complete it. I found myself watching him when he wasn't looking, studying the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, how his stern expression softened when he was truly relaxed, the surprising gentleness in his hands despite their obvious strength. "You're staring," he observed one evening, catching me in the act. I didn't look away. I'm trying to reconcile the alpha who terrified everyone at the mating ceremony with the man who spent a week patiently teaching me to communicate with squirrels. He laughed, a rare, rich sound that transformed his face. The squirrels are good practice. Their thoughts are simple, direct, perfect for beginners. Is that how others see you, the terrifying alpha? His amusement faded. It's safer that way. Power maintained through fear is stable, if not particularly fulfilling. Is that why you've never taken a mate before now? Because it would require showing something beyond the fearsome facade? His eyes met mine, surprise evident in their silver depths. You see too much, Eleanor Winters. Perhaps that's why the moon goddess placed me in your chair, I suggested. You needed someone who could see past the mask. The air between us changed, charged with possibility. Alexander set aside the book he'd been holding and moved to stand before me. The traditional mourning period for a potential mating is 7 days, he said quietly. Time for both parties to consider the match before committing fully. Those 7 days ended yesterday. My heart raced, but not from fear. And if I've made my decision, then I would ask what you've decided. His voice remained steady, but I could sense the tension beneath his controlled exterior. Rising from my chair, I closed the distance between us. I choose to embrace who I truly am, I said, echoing his words from days earlier. Both the seer and the wolf. Both the woman who felt lost her entire life and the mate who found her other half in the most unlikely place. The control he'd maintained shattered. He pulled me to him, one hand tangling in my hair as his lips found mine in a kiss that ignited every nerve ending in my body. The bond between us flared, that golden thread I'd glimpsed in wolf form, now visible even to my human eyes, pulsing, strengthening, binding us together in ways that transcended the physical. When we finally parted, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against mine. "My Eleanor," he murmured. "My little seer." "My alpha," I replied, the words feeling right on my tongue. "My mate." That night, beneath the full moon that had guided our kind for generations, we completed the mating bond in the ancient way, joining body, mind, and spirit in a union that not even death could sever. As the final connection locked into place, a vision washed over me, clearer than any I'd experienced before. I saw us in the years to come. standing together against threats that would test our strength and courage, rebuilding the legacy of the Lunar Seers, bringing balance to a world that had too long relied on power alone. I saw children with my fair hair and Alexander's silver eyes, carrying both our bloodlines into a future bright with possibility. When morning came, I woke as something new, not just Alpha's mate or Seer's daughter, not just wolf or human, but a perfect integration of all these aspects. The woman who had accidentally sat in the Lycan King's chair had found not just a mate, but her true self. And in the end, that was the greatest gift the moon goddess could have granted.